Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Rosenblum, and you're watching the Theo Nightly video for the 24th of May here in 2022. That's going to lead off the video tonight, which is Snapchat. And per their news, they issued a revenue warning. Not so much earnings, but they said that if even after a little bit of an upbeat earnings last time, they're saying that revenue will fall short of expectations, and they blame the general economic conditions on the slowdown. And that sent shockwaves. Seems like a stock like this may not have steady power or influence over others, but if that is what they're reporting, and they are issuing guidance, it's unlikely to be in a vacuum. So is Walmart, which had its earnings scare and miss, and inflation crimping the profits. And of course, that sent shockwaves down the retail sector, which includes Target. And now we're talking a relatively small company, Snapchat, and you may not be familiar with it, but it is on the key list of stocks that were the worst performers, was down 43%. And that's going to send shockwaves across the already weak technology sector. That includes Facebook, which of course includes or owns Instagram. Tesla is in that, but Google as well, advertisement. Nvidia actually has its earnings tomorrow, so we'll come back to that in a moment, but nonetheless, shares were off across the board, and the sector that bore the brunt of the selling was the XLY. XLY is the consumer discretionary. Let's take a look at how that played out in today's session. The Nasdaq was on the weakest end of the selling, and that's of course where the concentration was, right there, XLK, but right here in the consumer discretionary, that includes Tesla. So Tesla technically, along with Amazon actually, although we think of them as technology names, they are, or monsters of tech in general, they are part of the retail. Tesla sells cars. Amazon's a big online retail store. But Google and Facebook and Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, and others, they actually do fall, Adobe, Salesforce, Intuit. They do fall under the category of technology sectors, and that is XLK. And that is going to put pressure on the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq was off 200 points, down about 2%. At the low of the day, the Nasdaq Technology Index was down about 4%. But it wasn't all bearish. That's where the brunt of the selling took place. Snapchat, and their guidance about their assessment of the economic situation and how that will affect their earnings. Of course, advertisement for their platform. But across the board, financials were holding their own. Industrials were flat on the session, but the strength today came in the safety names. The safety names mainly being P for staples, V for healthcare, and U for utilities. Not large sectors or not large segments of the S&P, but nonetheless, they were the bullish headlines of the bullish plays in today's session. Healthcare being a larger sector than those. That's the only place where the green was seen. Everything else was mostly across the board red. Again, the leading stocks to the downside were mainly technology or retail names. And that just continues this shift toward how inflation is real. We know that to be real, but now it's to the point that it's objectively affecting earnings and outlooks about future earnings. And of course, corporate profits, if those tend to go down, stock prices will go down as well. Coming up, we do have Nvidia. It will report earnings. We can take a look at how that will play into the implied volatility. That's going to be after the bell on Wednesday. So we're going to focus our attention on Nvidia, which is about a 154% implied volatility, $18. Of course, you'll update that at the end of the session, but roughly speaking, $18 would be that expected move for the moment. Nvidia shares trading down to new 52-week lows and continuing the downtrend on the weekly chart and the daily chart. So I'll frame these out just looking at the weekly perspective over on the right, and of course the daily perspective on the left. And if you are of the bearish positioning or the bearish negative delta in your portfolio or option account premium, this is what you want to see. You want to see leading tech stocks, including Facebook, retail stock Tesla, retail and tech giant Google or Alphabet, of course Nvidia chips, Disney, which is communications, but also a large conglomerate, Netflix, also Boeing, Amazon, and some other stocks, including Target, which is down another 2% in today's session, Adobe, Apple, and others, just to name a few, breaking their support levels. If that occurs, the Nasdaq will most likely continue breaking its support levels and trading to the downside. The same will be true in the S&P, which on the weekly perspective is in that drop zone we've been discussing, drop zone being under 4,100, and that has led to a sell-off down to about the 3,800 that's in the SPX index, as seen here. And that does have targets down to 3,600 or even 3,550 or lower. It's hard to see that on the daily chart because that ends at the hard right edge or the right side of your price chart. But on the weekly chart, that does give a bigger perspective. And what's helpful to note for that is how far something can fall once it gets into a downtrend. It may be difficult to see how far a price can go if you're just looking at this daily chart, and that's what Facebook shares look like here when it was down at that 288 level. But as you see, just envisioning a downside path, a downside trend, or downside price targets to lower levels, that was a correct thing to think and play as the downtrend it continued and intensified. So weak stocks do tend to get weaker. Strong stocks do tend to get stronger. So let's take a quick perspective on which of the strong stocks are getting stronger. Perhaps not surprising, they are in the energy or utility sector. Not large market caps. Here's ConocoPhillips, XL Energy, and some others in the utility space. We'll just take a look at ConocoPhillips for one stock that did print out to a new 52-week high. But there are plenty of other stocks, take your pick, of those that are making new 52-week lows and continuing ongoing downtrends. And again, these are the leading edge of the downside selling activity in the broader market. And we see the Nasdaq is bearing the bulk. And the retail sector, which includes Nike and Target and Chipotle and some others, that are seeing additional sell-side activity. So let's just take a look at some of those. These are your stocks in the S&P 500. Just a scan. The personal or the public list right here. Stocks making new yearly lows. And I will put those in the S&P 500. 44 of them are pushing down to new lows, and the sort is by market cap, which includes Google, Amazon, Nike, Salesforce, ProLogic, Target, and down the list. Mostly you're going to see, in general, technology and retail names continue pushing lows. Just to highlight a few from the scan. Again, weekly chart on the right, daily on the left, and the downtrend continues. There is Amazon. Shares were trading upwards of 38 and 3,600. They now trade toward 2,000, and under that is additional selling, possibly toward 1,800. Nike is again a big retail or a known retail name that does continue pushing lows and downtrending. Behind that is Salesforce.com, and just to name a few, General Motors, GM. We'll look at Chipotle Mexican Grill, not a stock that you probably would trade, but it itself traded in this $19.50 per share level and now trades $12.50. So this has been a large sell-off. It may not feel that way, but a lot of stocks have been cut in half and greater. Chipotle not reaching the halfway point, but stocks such as Netflix, which again is at new lows or pushes lows, that was 700 and it traded down to about 160. Continuing with that, we'll see D.R. Horton, which is a home builder, the home builder index, and then Lennar, Garmin, Tractor Supply Company, retail, Expedia, which if you're going to book travel, that could be a travel company to look at, and on down the list, Darden, DRI, Carnival Cruise or Carnival Corporation, and I won't go any further because of the market cap. But you can see, you can actually pause the video and see which stocks are making those lows sorted by market cap. Some realties, real estate, and of course, retail names right there with some of the technology companies. And there's Under Armour. So that list you can generate yourself with the stocks making new 52-week lows here in thinkorswim. Again, keep watching the news, keep watching the prior or the previous levels in play. But don't lose sight of the bigger picture on the right, which is the weekly chart and how low prices can go. And the Nasdaq is on the leading edge of that sell side. Of course, the Russell small cap is there as well. And these highs were made earlier in the year or later in 2021, whereas the broader S&P, that made the high earlier in January and has been down since. As always, be careful and safe. We'll take a look as we go through NVIDIA. We'll have its earnings, and then one more. Costco will be a big retail name that reports earnings after the bell on Thursday. Again, as always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Rosen with tonight's Theo video update from May the 24th, 2022.